Welcome back, everyone. Today is April 4th, 2026, and I want to start with a question that I think is the most strategically important question of this entire conflict and one that almost nobody in Western media is asking clearly enough. Who is actually winning this war? Not on the battlefield, not in the daily exchange of missiles and bombs and press conferences, but strategically, geopolitically. In the long game that great powers play across years and decades rather than across news cycles. And when you ask that question honestly, when you look at the data without the filter of American political messaging, a deeply uncomfortable answer emerges. The country winning this war most decisively is not America. It is not Israel. It is a country that has not fired a single shot in the entire conflict. It is a country whose soldiers are not in the Persian Gulf, whose aircraft are not in Iranian airspace, whose ships are not in the Strait of Hormuz. It is a country that started this war with a severely damaged economy, a military stretched thin by 3 years of brutal conflict in Ukraine, and an international standing weakened by years of Western sanctions. And that country is Russia. Vladimir Putin is sitting in Moscow right now watching the United States spend billions of dollars, deplete its most critical weapon stockpiles, fracture its alliances, and trap itself in an open-ended Middle Eastern conflict. And Putin is not just watching. He is profiting. He is strengthening. And he is reshaping the geopolitical architecture of an entire region in ways that will outlast this war by decades. Today, I am going to show you exactly how he is doing it, and why America, with all its military power, has no effective answer. Let me start with the money, because this is the most immediate and most concrete dimension of Russia's windfall from this war, and it deserves to be stated in the clearest possible terms. Before February 28, 2026, the Russian economy was in serious difficulty. Western sanctions had hammered Russian export revenues. Oil prices had been relatively moderate. The costs of the Ukraine war in ammunition, in equipment, in personnel, in economic resources diverted from civilian uses were mounting to levels that were straining the Russian federal budget in ways that Moscow could not publicly acknowledge. Russia built its 2026 federal budget on the assumption of oil prices around $60 per barrel. That was the planning assumption. That was the number the Russian finance ministry used to calculate how much money the government would have available to fund its military operations in Ukraine, pay its soldiers, maintain its social programs, and service its debts. And then February 28th happened, and American bombs started falling on Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz closed. And Brent crude surged from $65 to $120 per barrel in 30 days. And suddenly, Russia's budget calculation did not just improve, it was transformed. According to analysis by the KSE Institute, an independent economic research body, in a scenario where this war lasts 3 months, Russia will receive approximately $161 billion in additional export revenues. That is not a typo. $161 billion in additional revenues, on top of what Russia would have earned without the war. That is roughly $500 million per day flowing into Russian state coffers because oil prices are elevated by a war that Russia did not start, did not fight in, and did not pay for. And in additional budget revenues specifically, the estimate is $97 billion, which is more than Russia's entire fiscal deficit for 2025 in a single year, from a war it did not fight. The Peterson Institute for International Economics calculated it more simply. Every day this war continues and oil prices remain elevated, Russia earns approximately $500 million more than it would have without the war. $500 million per day. For doing nothing militarily. For simply existing as an alternative oil supplier to a world desperate for energy that can no longer come through the Strait of Hormuz. And here is the dimension of this that I think is most strategically significant and most completely absent from American public discourse. Those revenues are not going into Russian consumer spending or social programs or infrastructure. They are going directly into funding Russia's military operations in Ukraine. The war that America and its European allies have been trying to stop for 3 years, the war that has consumed hundreds of billions of dollars in Western military aid to Ukraine, the war that has tested the unity and the resources and the patience of the entire Western alliance, that war is now being sustained and funded by the economic consequences of America's war in Iran. The Patriot interceptor missiles that are being consumed, shooting down Iranian drones over Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Kuwait, are the same Patriot missiles that Ukraine desperately needs to protect its cities from Russian attack. The military attention, the diplomatic bandwidth, the political capital, the weapon stockpiles that America is pouring into the Persian Gulf are resources that are not available for the defense of Ukraine. And Russia understands this. Russia has planned for this. And Russia is exploiting it with extraordinary patience and discipline. UK Secretary of Defense John Healey said it plainly to the BBC this week when he described seeing the hidden hand of Putin behind Iran's war effort. And the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, was even more direct at a G7 meeting when she said, "We see that Russia is helping Iran with intelligence to target Americans, to kill Americans, and Russia is also supporting Iran with drones so that they can attack neighboring countries and U.S. military bases." Those words came not from an Iranian official or a Russian state media commentator. They came from the European Union's most senior foreign policy figure, speaking to the leaders of the world's 7 largest economies. Now, let me take you through exactly what Russia is doing to help Iran fight this war, because this is the technical and operational dimension of the Russia-Iran partnership that most people do not fully understand. The most important thing Russia is providing Iran is not weapons. It is eyes. Iran, for all its military preparation and strategic sophistication, has a significant weakness in this conflict. It has very limited ability to track fast-moving American naval assets across open water. Iran operates only a small constellation of military reconnaissance satellites, wholly insufficient for monitoring the movements of an entire American carrier strike group maneuvering in the Gulf of Oman. Russia does not share that limitation. Russia's Canopus V satellite, which was redesignated Qayyum when it was transferred to Iranian operational use, provides Tehran with round-the-clock optical and radar imagery of American military positions in the region. Russian satellites have photographed the U.S. military facility on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. They have photographed Kuwait International Airport. They have photographed the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. They have photographed American positions in Qatar and Turkey. And that imagery, in real time, has been passed to Iranian military planners who have used it to target their drone and missile strikes against American forces and American allies with significantly greater precision than Iran demonstrated in previous conflicts. Ukraine's President Zelensky published what he called irrefutable evidence that Russian satellites are capturing images of American military facilities in the Middle East for Iranian targeting purposes. And the pattern of Iranian strikes confirms this assessment. The types of targets Iran has been hitting, radar systems, satellite dishes, communication infrastructure at American bases, are exactly the kinds of targets you prioritize when you have satellite imagery telling you precisely where those systems are located. And several of those strikes have been successful. Iranian drones have hit American communication infrastructure at bases across the Gulf region with a precision that Iran could not have achieved using its own limited surveillance capabilities. But it does not stop at satellite imagery. Russia has also been providing Iran with something more subtle and in some ways more operationally significant, and that is drone technology upgrades. The Shahed kamikaze drone that Iran originally developed became, through Russia's war in Ukraine, a much more capable weapon. Russia took the original Iranian design, manufactured its own versions, and in the process improved them, made them faster, made them harder to detect, equipped them with better navigation systems, gave them cameras and artificial intelligence modules for terminal guidance, and crucially, equipped some of them with a Russian-made satellite navigation module called Kometa-B, which also functions as an anti-jamming shield, making the drone significantly more resistant to the electronic warfare that American and Allied forces use to defend against drone attacks. A Shahed drone containing this Russian Kometa-B component was used by Iran-backed Hezbollah to successfully hit a British airbase on Cyprus on March 1st. The British newspaper The Times confirmed the presence of the Russian component in the wreckage. And Russia has also been sharing with Iran something less tangible but enormously valuable, which is its accumulated tactical knowledge from 3 years of drone warfare against Ukrainian air defenses. Russia has learned through brutal operational experience exactly how to use waves of real drones combined with decoy drones to overwhelm and exhaust air defense systems. It has learned which altitudes, which approach angles, which timing patterns are most effective at saturating a defender's capacity to respond. And it has been sharing those lessons with Iran, which is now applying them against American air defense systems in the Persian Gulf with increasing effectiveness. And here is the detail that I think captures the scale of what Russia is doing better than any other single fact. The Washington Post, which was the first major American outlet to report on Russian intelligence sharing with Iran, quoted a U.S. official as describing Moscow's assistance as a pretty comprehensive effort. Pretty comprehensive. Those are not my words. Those are the words of an American official describing what Russia is doing to help Iran target and kill American service members. And when Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was asked about Russia and China's role in this conflict, he said, and I want you to hear this because it is one of the most extraordinary statements made by a senior American defense official in recent memory. He said, Russia and China are not really a factor here, Not really a factor. Russia is providing real-time satellite intelligence that is being used to kill American soldiers. Russia is supplying drone technology upgrades that are making Iranian drones harder to shoot down. Russia is earning $500 million per day from elevated oil prices caused by a war that is draining American weapons stockpiles. And the American Defense Secretary says they are not really a factor. I will leave you to draw your own conclusions about the quality of analysis informing American strategic decision-making in this conflict. Now I want to zoom out from the immediate tactical picture and show you the bigger geopolitical transformation that this war is accelerating, because I think this is where the story becomes truly historic in its implications. Before February 28, 2026, Russia, China, and Iran were described as an emerging axis, a loose alignment of powers united primarily by their shared opposition to American global dominance. Their cooperation was real, but it was also limited, transactional, and in many ways fragile. Russia was heavily engaged in Ukraine. Iran was under severe economic pressure from sanctions. China was managing its own economic challenges and carefully avoiding direct confrontation with the United States. The axis was more potential than actual. That is changing. This war is accelerating and deepening the structural alignment between Russia, China, and Iran in ways that will persist long after the last bomb falls on Tehran. The Russia-Iran Strategic Partnership Agreement, signed in January 2025, established a 20-year framework for cooperation covering defense, technology, energy, finance, and regional security. It has 47 provisions. It was signed less than 6 weeks before the war began. And everything that has happened since February 28th has only deepened and accelerated its implementation. Russia's financial windfall from elevated oil prices is being used to fund a military expansion in Ukraine that directly challenges NATO and American power in Europe. China's technical assistance to Iran, including the Beidou-3 satellite navigation system that has replaced American GPS for Iranian military forces, the YLC-8B anti-stealth radar that uses low-frequency waves specifically designed to detect F-35 stealth aircraft, and the steady flow of electronic warfare technology that has reshaped Iran's air defense capability, is creating a permanent shift in the military balance in the Middle East. And Iran, despite the enormous damage it has suffered, has demonstrated to every nation in the global south that a medium-sized power with the right technology partnerships can hold the most powerful military in the world to a standstill for more than 5 weeks. That demonstration has strategic consequences far beyond the Persian Gulf. Let me tell you about NATO and what is happening to the Western Alliance, because this is the dimension of Russia's strategic victory that I think deserves enormous attention and gets almost none. When America launched Operation Epic Fury on February 28th, it expected its NATO allies to line up behind it. That did not happen. Germany opposed the operation publicly. Spain opposed it publicly. France expressed serious reservations. Italy, whose prime minister is normally one of Trump's most reliable European supporters, publicly stated she disagrees with the American position. Trump responded by calling NATO a paper tiger and saying he was very disappointed in his allies. And here's the extraordinary geopolitical irony that Russia is savoring. The Iran War, a war that America launched partly to demonstrate its strength and resolve to potential adversaries, has instead produced the most serious fracture in the Western alliance since the 2003 Iraq War. And Putin is watching this fracture develop with undisguised satisfaction because a divided NATO is a weaker guarantor of Ukrainian security. The Patriot missiles being sent to the Gulf to defend Saudi Arabia from Iranian drones were not built in unlimited quantities. The defense industry cannot produce them faster than they are being consumed in this conflict. And every Patriot missile that defends a Gulf state oil terminal is a Patriot missile that is not defending a Ukrainian city from Russian attack. The Peterson Institute put it plainly. The U.S.-European alliance is deteriorating further as U.S. weapons and attention are diverted toward the Middle East. And Russia, which has spent the past 3 years trying to fracture Western support for Ukraine, has accomplished more toward that goal through the Iran war than it managed through any direct action in the previous 3 years. Now let me address something directly because I think intellectual honesty requires it. Russia's gains from this war are real, but they are not without risk. And I want to give you a complete picture rather than a one-sided one. The same elevated oil prices that are filling Russia's war chest are also creating inflation inside Russia that hurts ordinary Russian citizens. Russia's relationship with the Gulf states, which are also significant economic partners for Moscow, is being strained by a war that is economically devastating those states. And perhaps most significantly, if Iran is eventually defeated or substantially weakened by this conflict, Russia loses one of its most important strategic partners in the Middle East. A war-consumed Iran, an Iran that is internally fractured and economically prostrate, is not the strategic asset to Russia that a functioning and defiant Iran has been. The Chatham House analysis put this well when it observed that a weakened but resilient Iranian regime could become even more dependent on Russian diplomatic backing, expanding Moscow's leverage. But a destroyed Iranian state structure creates a vacuum that Russia cannot fill and that could destabilize Russia's entire southern strategic arc from the Caucasus to Central Asia. Russia wants Iran weakened enough to be more dependent on Moscow. Russia does not want Iran destroyed. And the tension between those two objectives creates a delicate balance that Putin is managing very carefully with his calibrated intelligence-sharing but no direct military involvement approach to this conflict. And here is the dimension of Russia's strategy in this war that I think is the most sophisticated and the most underappreciated. Russia is using this conflict as a live-fire laboratory. Every Iranian drone strike against American air defense systems generates data about American air defense response times, about the effectiveness of American jamming, about the gaps in American defensive coverage, about the quantities of interceptors being consumed per attack. That data is going back to Russian military planners who are studying it exhaustively to inform their own doctrine for potential future conflicts with NATO. Every successful Iranian strike against an American communication node or radar installation tells Russian planners something about where American vulnerabilities are. And Al Jazeera's analysis made this point about China explicitly, noting that Beijing is treating this conflict as a live-fire laboratory where every potential Iranian engagement against American assets generates targeting and intercept data that Chinese military planners will study exhaustively for the scenario China actually cares most about, which is Taiwan. Russia is doing exactly the same thing. For the first time in history, Iran is fighting a sustained multi-week conflict against the full conventional military capability of the United States. And Russia and China have ringside seats, backed by intelligence channels into the Iranian command structure. The lessons being learned in the Persian Gulf today will shape the military capabilities and doctrine of America's two most capable potential adversaries for the next decade and beyond. And America is paying for that education in blood and treasure and weapons stockpiles. Now let me bring all of this together and tell you what it means for the future of the Middle East, because the geopolitical transformation that is underway goes far beyond the immediate conflict. The Middle East before February 28, 2026, was a region where American power, while contested, remained the dominant organizing force. American bases in the Gulf, American security guarantees to Israel and Saudi Arabia, the American-managed peace process, the American-enforced sanctions regime against Iran, all of these formed an architecture of American dominance that had been built over 50 years and that most regional actors, whatever their private feelings about it, had learned to operate within. That architecture is fracturing. The American decision to go to war with Iran without consulting its Gulf allies, the economic devastation that the Hormuz closure has inflicted on those same allies, the demonstrated inability of American air power to completely suppress Iranian military capabilities after 5 weeks, and reportedly more than 20,000 strikes, all of these have shaken the confidence of regional actors in the permanence and reliability of American power in ways that will take years to fully manifest, but that are already visible in their behavior. The Gulf states are pursuing diplomatic contacts with Russia and China that would have been unthinkable 18 months ago. Pakistan, which has been positioned as America's diplomatic conduit to Iran, is simultaneously deepening its economic relationships with China. Turkey is pursuing its own diplomatic agenda that does not align with American preferences. The 2023 Saudi-Iran rapprochement that China brokered under its Global Security Initiative, which established China as a credible diplomatic actor in a region where America had previously monopolized that role, looks even more significant in retrospect than it did when it was signed, because it demonstrated that there is an alternative organizing principle for Middle Eastern diplomacy that does not depend on American dominance. And the Iran war is accelerating the development of that alternative. And so let me end today with what I believe is the most honest assessment I can offer you of where this is heading. Putin is not going to win this war militarily. Russia is not going to defeat America in the Persian Gulf. That is not what is happening, and it is not what Moscow is trying to achieve. What Putin is doing is winning the strategic environment. He is using America's war in Iran to replenish his war chest, to drain American weapons stockpiles, to fracture the Western alliance, to accelerate the Russia-China strategic alignment, and to demonstrate to the global South that American military power is not the unchallengeable force it once appeared to be. And here's the most important thing I want to leave you with today. None of what Russia is gaining from this war required Russia to take a single military risk. Not one Russian soldier is in danger in the Persian Gulf. Not one Russian aircraft is flying over Iran. Not one Russian ship is in the line of fire. Russia is winning, economically and strategically, by doing almost nothing except providing intelligence data and sitting next to an oil well while prices rise. There is an old saying in geopolitics that the best wars to fight are the ones your enemies fight for you. Vladimir Putin has found a way to make America fight a war that serves Russian interests without Russia paying any of the costs. And the longer this conflict continues, the more Russia wins. And the more America pays. And the more the Middle East and the world shifts away from the order that America spent 75 years building. I will see you in the next video.